This is part 5 of the Craftsman King Seeley 3-wheel bandsaw rebuild series. If you haven't seen part 4, click the link at the top of the screen. In this video, we're going to be cleaning up a bunch of the parts and prepping them for paint. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff and welcome to my shop. We got a lot to cover, so let's get to it. So in part 3, I mentioned that we placed all the parts except for these aluminum parts here and the electrical parts and plastic parts inside the citric acid bath. And this is after I've pulled them out and rinsed everything off. And all of the small parts you see in those plastic bins were basically just rinsed off, dried off, and then they got a coat of WD-40. But as you can see, the paint came off of a lot of the parts, but it didn't come off of all the parts. And in the last video, we already cleaned up the table. So this video was shot, or this piece of the video was shot before that happened. So cleaning up these parts, basically just removing the paint from them. I'm using a wire wheel and I'm just going to go over them. If I can get it done with the hand drill, then I will. This half of the cover, the back cover, most of the paint did come off, so cleaning it up wasn't as difficult as cleaning up the front cover. And the inside, the paint stuck better than it did on the outside. So as you can see, there's quite a bit of paint in there, but the wire wheel will pull it off. You just got to be careful around the edges that you don't bend the part you're working on. And it might help if you use some quick clamps to stabilize the part on the table. So this is the front cover, and the paint on this was a lot more, it was better adhered than the back cover. So I had to go to the wire wheel on the angle grinder, which is fine, no big deal. These are just steel brush wire wheels. They're not brass brush. But we're just cleaning it up as best we can. And then you may have to go to a smaller wheel to get into tight areas. I should probably be wearing a respirator while doing this, but, you know. And this is the frame, and the same thing. We're just going to do this for every part that has a lot of paint on it. Just get it as cleaned up as possible. You can see that the rust has been removed from all these parts, though, and that's what the citric acid bath did. So the previous owner had used some white paint or off-white paint on several of these parts, especially the motor mount. And it was definitely a lead-based paint, so I should have definitely been wearing a respirator, but I didn't. And then I'm just using some bottle brushes to clean out the bores on the various parts. And then there's the motor mount. And I don't get it all out of there, but I get most of it out of there. Now the paint that was on the end frames for the motor, that was some insane paint. I mean, it was resistant even to the wire wheel. I ended up having to go to my really tight crimped wire wheel to get it off of there. And here we have the stator, and since there's no wires or windings inside the stator, this is kind of safe compared to the last motor we did with this, but we're just using the wire wheel, brass wire wheel on my grinder to clean up that. And this is one of the trunnions. The same thing, we're just hitting it with the brass wire wheel. And then these are the 4 mounts that mount the frame to whatever you're going to mount the bandsaw on. they were really rusted, but cleaning them up is no problem. That's a part to the motor mount, and that's another part to the motor mount. So cleaning these big parts up is not really a chore. This is the power panel back cover. But when we get to the smaller stuff, there's the front cover for the power panel. I use a pair of vice grips to hold the part for like small screws and nuts and bolts and that kind of thing. So this is the aluminum bracket that slides when you, or encloses the sliding mechanism for adjusting the tension. And although the aluminum wasn't rusty or anything, it was dirty, and it went through the simple green bath, but it didn't go through the citric acid bath. So I'm cleaning up the aluminum parts with the wire wheel as well. And this is one of the idler shafts, and I'm using 320 grit on it just to clean it up. I did that for both of the idler shafts. Back at the grinder, this is the thrust roller. There's two of these, so I'm just cleaning it up. They were in good shape, so you can buy replacements of these on eBay, but these were in good shape. I dropped it a couple times, but no big deal. This is just one of the screws for adjusting the tension, I believe. And then this just shows you how I use the vice grips on smaller stuff that's hard to hold. So yeah, the wire wheel comes in very handy. And these are all the parts that we cleaned up. So I'm just going to spray them down with a penetrating lubricant. I like the super slick stuff. And then we'll roll them and continue to spray them. And all we're doing is just coating them to prevent them from rusting, since most of them are bare metal now. So the next thing was to clean up the rotor, and for this I want to go ahead and disconnect the 4 wires from the coils that are inside the rotor, as you can see, and then I wrapped them in electrical tape and inserted the rotor into my chuck on my metal lathe. And I'm going to go ahead and clean up that flat that's on the end of the shaft. I'm just using a file for that. And then we're just going to clean up the shaft itself. And this is 220 sandpaper. I'm just going to hit it with 220 and then 320. We don't want to take a whole lot of material off of this. So then we go to wet sanding, 320, 400, 600, and then 800, and then 1000. And then we'll apply the Meguiar's mag and aluminum polish. And then we're going to buff that off of there. So any of the shafts or bores that are going to have bearings in them. You just want to take off the minimal amount that you can take off to clean it up. And then we flip the rotor over and do the same thing for the other side. After that, any of the bare metal we're going to coat with that penetrating oil and then wipe it down. And here I'm just cleaning up the contacts where the wires connect. And they were all pretty badly corroded, so that's some 100 grit sandpaper I'm using just to clean it up. Then we'll reconnect all those wires. And next we're back at the end frames, and so there's a lot of areas that I couldn't get with the wire wheels, so I'm using some abrasive wheels that are on my Fordham, which is basically a Dremel, and then some brass brushes to clean out any of the bores. So those are the oil wick bores, and cleaning those out. And I'll look down in there and make sure everything is out of there. Next, it's time to start masking. So we're going to mask the brass bearings that are inside this, or bronze. I guess it's bronze. So we just don't want to get any paint on that. So after that, I've got these silicone plugs that I use for painting firearms and stuff. So they come in a variety of sizes, and I can just plug up the holes for the oil wick, for instance. Like so. And we'll do that for both end frames. Next, we've got the top part of the pedestal mount that the bandsaw mounts to, and it's got two bores on the inside that connect to the column. So we just mask those off. And here we're just masking off the inside of the stator. And then this is the frame. And so we're going to mask off all of the bolts that are coming out of the frame, as well as any of the milled surfaces that are on the frame. And then we've got the table, and obviously we cleaned up the table in part 4, so here we are just masking the tabletop. And then once we've got everything bordered and the center stuff masked off, we'll use wax paper to mask the large surface areas. And that's going to wrap up this video. In part 6, we will be priming and painting. I hope you enjoyed this video or found it useful. If you did, please like and subscribe. I appreciate all the support. And like I said, we'll be painting next video. So I will see you next time.